Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our May 2024 State Advisory Council meeting. Today's meeting is focused on keeping the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan at the heart of our work, just as we think about what's most important for kids and families. My name is Dr. Morgan Crossman, and I'm the Executive Director of Building Bright Futures, which is Vermont's Early Childhood State Advisory Council. For today's meeting, I'll give you a brief outline. We are dedicating the first part of today's meeting to celebrating the progress and monitoring the state's Early Childhood Action Plan for Vermont. And at around 2:30 to 3 o'clock, we'll have our State Advisory Council hold a brief business meeting, and that's where we'll have our SAC members review and hear a presentation on the FY25 Building Bright Futures budget, and we'll have a vote. So to get started and do a quick orientation to where we are with the state's Early Childhood Action Plan that we call the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan, we're really excited to bring you all together today as the key point in time where we're reviewing and evaluating progress on the 4 goals we've articulated and the different objectives and strategies in the state's strategic plan. I feel very honored that my team and the Building Bright Futures Network holds and shepherds this strategic plan on behalf of Vermont's kids and families. And then we're also going to be reviewing those goals and strategies as we think about the coming year to think about implementation. So just a quick thank you to all of you for being with us today and to the entire Building Bright Futures Network for your continued commitment to strengthening the early childhood system and improving the well-being of kids and families prenatal to age 8 in Vermont. The VECAP as a document is so critical to our state. Again, it's the strategic plan for our system, and it really touches all of the different sectors, services, resources, and supports that are designed to build this really complex system for kids and families. And you all are those who are really in the weeds of providing service provision and really supporting those kids and families. And our job is to build that collective vision and strategy and then accountability to measure and monitor success over time. So this strategic plan is measurable through 2026 and articulates the following vision that's on your screen for kids and families. Vermont aspires to realize the promise of each and every Vermont child by ensuring that the early childhood system is an integrated, continuous, comprehensive, high-quality system of services that's equitable, accessible, and will improve outcomes for children in the prenatal period to age 8 and their families. It's designed to be a living document and to evolve based on the new evidence and data that we have, based on best practice and lessons learned within our communities. And as we improve how we review and monitor this and identify and measure outcomes and access for children, families, and the system, our goal is to work hard to update and evaluate and monitor that progress over time, but also to make sure that everyone across our system is able to see themselves in that plan and make sure that their work is represented within the different broad goals and strategies. For those of you who may be new to the Building Bright Futures Network, we have seen this plan go through many different iterations. It was originally drafted in 2013, and then the most recent update was in 2020. What's really exciting about the strategic plan is that we are about to initiate the update in the next year and a half. And one of the most important pieces that we've committed to is centering equity in the next strategic plan. And we haven't been able to execute that as well as we'd like or as intentionally as we could. So we're really excited to have additional capacity through a team of consultants called the Creative Discourse Group, who are providing additional support as we update this process and as we engage early childhood leaders across the system to make sure that we all have the right level of awareness and the skills to create an equitable and just early childhood system. So we're really excited to share more about that with you over the next couple of months. But for today's meeting, I want to transition you to Kate to talk a little bit more about what to expect as we transition into the rest of our strategic plan summit today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Morgan. Hello, my name is Kate Bailey, and I'm the network manager at BBF. And as Morgan said, our goal for today is to recommit ourselves to the Early Childhood Action Plan, our shared strategic plan, and what we call the VECAP. So BBF often starts our meetings with a mindful moment. So today's mindful moment, I'm going to read aloud this vignette we wrote in 2020 to help make the VCAP feel more tangible through a visualization of a Vermont child born in 2026. This was created with input from one of our VECAP committees, the Child Outcomes Accountability Team. In the year 2026, a child is born to a family in Vermont. We will call her baby Mariah. Vermont is a state where all children and families are accepted for who they are, and we support this child from the very start, all the way through their development and education. This child thrives with the loving care of her parents and caregivers. Her family is safe and stable in their home and have food in their fridge today and on the horizon. Baby Mariah's parents use paid family leave and home visiting to support the physical and mental health of both parents and baby. The family is connected to their diverse community and can access services, resources, and support they need, including but not limited to high-quality childcare, a faith community, mental health support, healthy food, and jobs. Mariah grows into a toddler, preschooler, and eventually transitions into the local elementary school. She is resilient to navigate even the difficult days she will face. Mariah does not yet know there is a community holding her and her family through a seamless system of support. This is a system where all children have a healthy start, where families and communities play a leading role in children's well-being, where families have access to high-quality opportunities that meet their needs, and where the early childhood system is integrated, well-resourced, and data-informed. This is the future. Alrighty, we're going to transition into some introductions, and we're so excited to have so many participants from the vast BBF network here with us today. So we're thrilled that you're here, and we had over 120 people registered from every level, every corner of the BBF network. So I'm going to just go through a little bit of what that network looks like. And if we're talking about you, come off mute and just say hello and bring some noise and energy into the space. So to kick us off, we have incredible regional council representation today. About 40% of people who registered are connected to one of our 12 BBF regional councils. This is your cue. Please unmute and make some noise if you are here from a regional council. Anyone? Any of the 40% want to come off mute and say hello?
I can say hello. I'm not sure exactly what I need to say, but
that's all. Nice for being here.
Thanks. I'm from the Burlington Children's Space.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, we'll just literally just saying hello. So we'll do introductions in the chat after. But we also have a great turnout from people involved in our one of our 7 or sometimes multiple of our 7 VECAP committees. This includes the Child Outcomes Accountability Team, the Families and Communities Committee, Early Learning and Development, and there's a couple of other teams with approximately 20% of folks registered. So again, VECAP committee members, if you want to come off mute and say hello, you're welcome to do so.
Hello.
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 Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Great. Thank you. If you are a member of our 27-member State Advisory Council, please unmute and say hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I know you're here.
Hi.
Yes.
Hello. Greetings.
Thank you. And finally, we are joined by members of the Creative Discourse Group who are providing equity and project management as we launch our update for the VCAP. So if you're here from the Creative Discourse Group, say hi.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you.
Thanks. Okay, and this is finally, last but not least, all of us BBF staff, a 17-person Building Bright Futures team. Please unmute and say hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, BBF team representing. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. now, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat bar, some of you I think have already begun to do so. That's excellent. For the SAC members who are here, if you can better identify yourself and you're able to rename your Zoom name and just add, a /SAC at the end, that would be great. So we know who our State Advisory Council members are. And generally in our State Advisory Council meetings, we ask folks to turn their cameras off unless they're in the SAC meeting, but we want to see everyone's faces today. So everyone is welcomed and encouraged to keep their videos on throughout the meeting. And with that said, I think we'll pop back on our shared screen with a couple more pieces of orientation for the meeting today. And now I'm going to remind everyone, if you may have seen an email in your inboxes from data at Building Bright Futures. This is our important network partner survey. You are all important partners and collaborators in this work, and we really take your feedback very seriously, and it's really important for us to get that feedback. So we're looking forward to reading those responses and hearing your experiences with the State Advisory Council, with the regional council you may be a part of, a VECAP committee, or with Building Bright Futures as an organization. So this survey is open through this Friday, May 24th. If you haven't received a survey invitation, please check either your spam folder or reach out to info@buildingbrightfutures.org and we'll have that survey sent your way. And to thank you for your time, we're also giving participants the opportunity to enter a raffle for one of 3 $50 gift cards. And your contact information will be used only for the gift card purposes, not for being linked to survey responses. And since today we are dedicating this meeting to the VECAP and to work done across the BBF network, I want to share our further appreciation for our public and private co-chairs of our 7 VECAP committees, who play an important role in holding the short-term and the long-term vision that is needed to monitor these issues and to engage their committees in this important work. So we have Sarah Morrison and Jen Fortman, who are the co-chairs of our Families and Communities Committee, Cheryl Wilcox, who is chair of the Early Childhood Interagency Coordinating Team, Katie Leffel, co-chair of the Child Outcomes Accountability Team, Sherry Carlson and Dawn Rouse, co-chairs of the Early Learning and Development Committee, Becky Millard and Lynn Robbins, who are co-chairs of the Professional Preparation and Development Committee, and then Flor Diaz-Smith and Elisa Stahlberg, who are the co-chairs of the State Advisory Council. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today and for our leadership. And with that, I will transition over to Beth.
Thanks, Kate. I'm Beth Trusansky. I'm the Deputy Director of Building Bright Futures. It's a thrill to have you here today. Holding the vision and strategic plan and monitoring Vermont's early childhood system are 2 of BBF's key charges in state and federal statute. And within the VECAP itself, BBF's primary responsibility is Goal 4, creating an integrated, well-resourced, and data-informed system. It's about bringing partners together to set appropriate benchmarks and goals, monitoring the work, and determining where we see integration, where there are gaps in resources, holding all partners accountable, and supporting the state in using data to inform policy. So here on this slide, we're sharing some ways that we monitor, that the whole network really monitors the early childhood system. We have regional councils are on the ground doing live monitoring of the needs of kids, families, communities, educators, and providers. So glad that we have regional council partners joining us today. Data gives us information on the status and trends of outcomes for children and families, as well as services and programs statewide. VECAP committees serve to monitor progress, implement strategies, and elevate priorities and recommendations to move forward. And this, today, the VECAP Summit offers a virtual place where each of you, as part of our system, has the opportunity to document where you see progress. How are we really doing in making the system work better for children and families, as well as what work remains. So thrilled that you can be here today. So today we ask for your help. Today is really about monitoring the VCAP and to help for you to provide input on where you have seen progress towards the VCAP. As we shared earlier, the VCAP is made up of 4 goals, and these are areas where focused measurement and effort is needed to change outcomes for children and families. The plan then dives deeper to articulate objectives and strategies under each goal. These give us direction on where our work needs to focus over the course of a 5-year plan. So here's just one example under goal 1, which is all children have a healthy start. And then under that with objective and strategies below that. We are going to put a link to the VCAP into the chat if you haven't looked at it. It's a hefty document, which is why we have identified some specific areas that we are asking for input today, instead of on kind of the very broad areas. So as you've heard, that as we are reaching the end of this current VCAP, which was written in 2020 and will expire in 2026 and working to update, we are turning to you for input on how we are doing towards specific strategies. And we're going to do that in some small groups. So small groups will focus on on specific VCAP strategies through a facilitated discussion. Topics have been chosen based on areas of the early childhood system where we identified we're lacking data on progress and priorities, and hope to tap into our collective expertise across the system to monitor progress toward these particular parts of the VCAP and particular parts of the system. So that's our focus for today. We know we are leaving out today some well-loved topics, like, for example, childcare. And that's for good reason. We are actually doing a lot of monitoring and monitoring the implementation of Act 76 and monitoring related to kind of the implementation of childcare and pre-K in our system. So that is not an area that we actually have a fairly good idea about what data we have and what data we do not have. So we've chosen topics outside of that area, for example. So I will go over the small group topics in a minute, but really briefly, in small groups, this is what we want to hear from you. Where have you seen progress toward this strategy over the last 5 years? Tell us about the impact this change has made on kids and families as a result from your perspective. And then finally, if there's time, to explore what you think is missing from our current approach in this strategy. We realize we could spend all day on barriers, but today we want to celebrate progress and mark what we have accomplished, as well as being able to identify some of those priorities and needs at the end of our time in small groups. How's that sound? Heads nodding, that's great. So we're going to collect all this information from small groups. It'll be added to the VCAP inventory that we are building. And this is all kind of part of our efforts to monitor progress toward the 5-year plan. So you'll have time in small groups. We will come back together for a little bit of debrief and kind of quick sharing of highlights in those small groups, move into a discussion among SAC members. So that's a little bit of our plan for today. Groups will be facilitated by BBF team members, and you'll get to choose which group you want to be in. We know we asked you which group in registration. If you don't know what that was, don't panic. It doesn't really matter. You'll get to decide where you want to go. So let me just quickly go over some of the strategies in the areas that we identified and would like your input today. So the first topic is screening to increase access. How are we doing to expand screening for perinatal mental health, food and housing security, and medical and early care education settings to increase access to medical and mental health supports and services that children and families need? The second group is around education transitions. How are we doing to create equitable access to early childhood and elementary education by improving transitions between programs, services, and education? Another group on school-based mental and physical health services. How are we doing to ensure children and families have access to the developmental services and resources they need through expansion of school-based mental and physical health services? A group on family-friendly policies. How are we doing to support parents and caregivers to build connection in a child's early years through the promotion of family-friendly policies such as paid parental leave, infant at work policies, and parental/family leave insurance programs to all families with a newborn or a newly adopted child? A group on equitable access for vulnerable populations. How are we doing to identify and address achievement gaps to provide equitable access and outcomes for children from vulnerable populations? And one on workforce data. How are we doing to understand workforce trends, needs, compensation, and benefits through expanded funding and development and implementation of workforce data collection, evaluation, and report dissemination? And we had one more group that we had advertised around promoting efficiencies, which we got didn't get a lot of interest. So we were going to fold that into the other topics and ask those folks to choose something different.
We are now going to have a brief opportunity to hear from all of the groups. Welcome back for those just coming back into our space. My name is Anna Brulette, and I am Building Bright Futures Policy and Program Director. The purpose of the small groups was to gather your input on how we are doing towards specific strategies outlined in the 2020 VCAP. We would love now to welcome each group to share one thing that stands out. So hopefully you got to the point in your conversations where a spokesperson was identified. Try to do so, try to get ready now. I'm going to give folks a moment as we kind of queue folks up. While we are waiting to get that started, just another reminder to please complete the BBF partner survey. It should have been sent out via SurveyMonkey from data@buildingbrightfutures.org last week, and I believe folks will get a reminder this week. And if you didn't get the link, please just shoot someone on our team an email, and we'll make sure you get one. So with that, we're going to give the small groups an opportunity to share a couple of highlights, or a theme that stood out to you. We're going to ask the groups to kind of go in the order of the themes that were initially kind of on the slide there. So we'll be starting with the screening to increase access group. If you identified a spokesperson for your group, if you could put the name of that person, or if that person wants to put something in the chat just to help facilitate queuing people up more quickly, that would be wonderful, and just identify the name of your group. Okay, so we'll start with group one. I'm seeing a note that suggests perhaps Elisa is our guinea pig or spokesperson. So Elisa, I'll hand it over to you to do any sharing.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. I'm Elisa Stolberg. I'm Director for Family and Child Health at the Health Department. We had a great conversation. I think collectively, I think folks shared that there was a lot of progress in this space that we are seeing, screening across multiple domains, whether that's in the pediatric healthcare space, in CIS, and home visiting, through the Dulce program, through Help Me Grow. Sort of a lot of screening is happening. And I think from an accomplishment side, I think not only is the screening happening, but there is more and more integration among all of those spaces in which kids and families are. And so that when the screening is happening, that there is connection to services and resources. It's by no means perfect, and there's a lot of work to do, but that you can sort of see all of these places where families are really kind of working in the same direction and making sure that families are getting connected to services and support. So a lot more work to do. We've learned a lot about screening and how to do that in service of families and not in harm of families. And so I think there's a lot of, again, a lot of work to do in this space, but certainly more families are being identified with needs, and that we can sort of help connect them to our services. So I think that I'll stop there, Anna. Thank you.
That's perfect. Thanks, Elisa. Let's see. I think next is our education transition group.
Yep. Erica McLaughlin, I'm happy to share. We talked a lot around successes in thoughtful transitions from pre-K to K that serve that might serve as a statewide model to discuss how we have the school-based special educators going into the homes and into child care providers to really take a look at the students. We talked about having pre-K parent nights so that they would understand what transition to kindergarten looks like. We talked about then having the kindergarten transitions and having parents deeply involved in that process and really having screening opportunities to really understand what students' needs are so that there is a seamless transition from pre-K into kindergarten. We had additional opportunities for parents to engage with the school in advance of coming to kindergarten, like the 200 book club, where they would borrow books in a bag and encourage reading at home. So there was lots of discussion around pockets of what's already working in the state and then capitalizing on those pockets of goodness. My group can certainly jump in if I missed anything.
Thanks, Erica. Okay, it looks like there was a second education transitions group, and I believe Elise is the spokesperson.
Yeah, so our group talked about the importance of alignment between programs and transitioning from one program to another. We'd seen a lot of improvement when there was consistent practices and like just some better child outcomes and family outcomes when there's that alignment. And the note that kind of nationwide and statewide, we don't have a consistent framework for transition planning with families, and that Head Start has the most consistent practices, so we can really leverage some of those practices that they already have in place. And we also noted that kids on a plan, such as an IEP or a 504, a one plan, any child that's on a plan has very consistent transition practices because it's federally mandated and state mandated, but also just knowing that our most vulnerable kids need many opportunities to be practicing and for their families to be talking about their strengths and their concerns. So really kind of leveraging some of that, those pieces, and having maybe some thoughts around statewide kindergarten summits, kindergarten transition planning with families to create more of that alignment, and using like Head Start and Part C and Part B, leveraging some of their already known and successful strategies. If I forgot anything, my group, please.
Thank you, Elise. Next, we'll have group 3, which is school-based mental and physical health services. It looks like Deb Hartwick will be sharing.
Hi, I'm Deb Hartwick. I'm a retired pediatrician and a new member of the State Advisory Council. And I think our group felt that the assessment standpoint, yeah, identifying need is something that's happening again fairly well, as the first group identified, sort of through both the medical homes and the early childhood services, but that when those needs are identified, where things can sometimes fall short is in the school-based services for the physical and mental health. And when those wraparound services are there, a number of our folks gave examples of feeling that those families were more successful, and those children ultimately did better and had more success in their lives, and particularly for working families, for parents that may be dealing with issues in their own personal lives. Again, transportation sometimes can be an issue. Sometimes parents are needing to get to their own appointments for physical or mental health. And so when the child can receive those services in the school, be it a visit with a therapist, if it's a school-based health clinic where they might be able to be seen for an acute care visit, an ear infection, or to follow up on their asthma medication, that really supported the families. And where things are, I think, falling short, and where we need to try to probably work to try to gain more data, is the workforce issue. And I know there's another group that's going to be speaking about that, but we often identify need. We have great people on the ground, but just not enough people. And of the ones that are providing the services, obviously burnout can sometimes play an issue. So I don't know if my group has other things that they want to add to that, but that's the general sense from our perspective.
Thanks so much, Deb. Next, we have group 4, which is family-friendly policies. And I believe Dimitri is their spokesperson.
Hi, I'm Dimitri Garter. I'm the business rep on the State Advisory Council. So our group focused our discussion largely around family-friendly policies and practices within the workplace. And there's sort of 2 ages of workforce policies. There's pre-COVID, and then kind of during and post-COVID policies. And a lot has changed, and a lot of questions remain about what will happen in the future. But I commented that based on my experience working with much larger employers than my own, that even before COVID, there was a trend in the direction of providing more family-friendly practices or accommodations within the workplace around informal practices, or things like allowing for parents to bring children into the workplace during after-hours care, or breastfeeding and chest feeding facilities within the workplace, all the way up to actually providing childcare services within a childcare center within the employer. Some of the comments from the group was that fairly broad diversity of reactions from parents, where some are saying that they have access to those types of benefits in the workplace, and many saying that they don't. So even though workplace policies have started to move in a positive direction, it's not evenly distributed. And in particular, my anecdotal observation is that larger employers tend to provide more generous benefits than smaller employers. That's not always the case, but that does tend to be the case. If you work for a smaller business, especially with only a very small handful of employees, like a retail business, they tend not to have either the scale or the economic model that supports some of those in workplace benefits. So size is one factor, and then there's also the nature of the workplace itself, how work is structured. Obviously, in an office environment, we have more, employers like mine have more flexibility in giving our workers flex time, or hybrid policies around remote work or in-person work, which can help. Some employers don't have those same abilities because their work is structured differently, or their workforce is structured differently. So it's not evenly distributed. And I think one of the comment I made was that early during the discussions around the childcare bill, many in the employer community felt that because of the tendency of larger employers to provide some of these benefits in the workplace, that seemed like a reasonable solution as a policy initiative. And it took a lot of time and effort to have that conversation with employers to say that's true for larger employers, but does that really work as a system? And having that conversation, I think we were able to help employers understand that it's really not necessarily the most effective system. And then there was also a comment that, employers are not necessarily in the business of providing childcare either. So it's not even an ideal scenario from the standpoint of outcomes for the children as well. The primary, I think the challenge, I don't know if are we reporting out on challenges as well?
Not at this moment, Dimitri.
Okay, so I'll save those comments for later, and they're probably already obvious, but hope that helps.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So next we have our two groups that tackled the priority related to equitable access for vulnerable populations. And it looks like Kiona is going to be the spokesperson for the first.
I'll be brief. Our group, the most tangible example that we discussed around successes was the expansion of CCFAP, so increasing access to financial assistance for families across the state, their child care financial assistance program, which felt like a program that we could see actively bringing more families into equitable access to child care. And in general, there was sort of a reflection on the fact that sort of awareness of equitable access or the increasing priority of equity in these sort of like systems change efforts felt like it was happening. So equitable access, awareness to prioritizing equity inside of these systems improvements certainly was there, but there were fewer things that folks that really could put their finger on, like, yes, we've seen this change and we've seen this happen inside of our either the families that we're supporting or the system. So one great example through the CCFAP extension and the general sort of feeling as though more community spaces, the regional councils were talking more about equity, which populations are sitting at the margins of the improvements in these systems in their communities, and how to figure out how to sort of meet those folks where they're at and create pathways towards more support that they could have.
Great. Thank you, Kiona. All right, next I get to pick on my group. Jackie, can you be the spokesperson for our group?
Sure. So we also talked about the CCFAP a bit, but more about the eligibility changing this, hopefully this summer. That will roll out nicely, so that the citizenship status won't be asked as part of the application process. And we also talked about IHIP, the Immigrant Health Insurance Plan that families have been accessing to get health care for their children and pregnant parents. And also we talked about recognizing the 2-year wait list for some autism screening and needing and having planning for that to get shortened. And also we didn't have a lot that we could say, yes, this has changed, but soon we will get there.
Thank you, Jackie. All right, we are on to our last two groups, both of whom focused on workforce data. And it looks like, John, you're the spokesperson for the first.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. So very informed and informative group. I think first a shout out to Jessica Broomstead, is it? Who as a legislator really helped us stay focused and brought forward great questions and great comments. And I think we appreciated that. Sharon pointed out a number of important details that VTAYC has been bringing forward, particularly in the last several years. Teach being one, the number of scholarships that have been provided through that entity. The apprenticeship model has really gotten refined and is well on its way to accomplishing all the goals that were sketched out for it initially. Oh, as to teach, this was the graduation of the first cohort of folks with BAs supported by Teach, so that's pretty impressive and pretty delightful. At kind of big picture levels, Sherry Carlson kind of focused us on sort of the schema that the P2P, the power to the profession, has been rendering for us for a good while, and those are getting specific. In general, the conversation was positive. The feeling seemed to be that the goals that were initially put forward are being met. There are of course, details that need to be worked out, some major issues that have to be addressed. One is that higher ed institutions have shifted a lot in terms of the education that we're providing, and a number of excellent institutions have either closed the program or shifted the direction of their program. So we really need to focus more closely on that. And I think I'll stop there and ask for support and help from the marvelous people who are also in this group. So thank you.
Thank you, John. All right, and Darla, it looks like your group was shy, and you're going to be our BBF spokesperson from that last workforce data group.
Yeah, so I will also say that we were involved in our conversation, and I missed the note saying that we were coming up on time. So I didn't have a lot of time to pressure somebody into being our spokesperson either. So anyway, a lot of the same things that John just brought up, our group talked about. I think the one that made everyone the most happy was an anecdote that was shared where a friend of one of our members was able to find an infant spot before their child was 2. So that was a great feeling and something to celebrate. But definitely we called out the apprenticeship programs, the Teach scholarships, student loan assistance programming, that those were very important in bringing folks to the field and really bolstering bolstering the number of folks coming into the field. So Act 76 resulting in higher wages, benefits, healthcare, and then that next step that'll be being implemented that someone else mentioned earlier. Tech centers offering fundamentals, that was a huge step forward. So really, shout out to not only our college level, but our high schools really coming into the programming and helping to move things forward. Stackable credentials at CCV, the certificate, the associate's degree, they can transfer to Vermont State universities. So that was another great piece that we talked about. The prior learning assessment role in increasing credentials as well. All of those pieces really seem to add up to be supportive of folks looking to enter the field or already in the field and looking to have those credentials. There are a number of things that we could talk about here, but children's finance, children's finance, really helping on that business side. I think for a long time, we didn't always look at early care and learning as a business, and to have that true support in place feels very important to the group that we were talking about. Let's see, what else can I tell you that we talked about? Data on workforce credentials, having that data available felt very important. So I'll look to my group to see if anyone wants to add anything. If I missed anything of importance that you want to call out, please feel free to do that now. Otherwise, I think that's the end of what I have to offer.
Thank you, Darla, and thank you to all of you. It was incredibly helpful and informative to hear what each of your groups kind of discussed at the highest level. And really, it's been stated already today, but just want to note that at this group's collective knowledge and our network's collective knowledge and expertise is really critical in our ability to understand and monitor progress for young children and their families, and for this collective strategic plan, the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan. So thank you for your time and being here together today and the small group exercise. We really appreciate all of your expertise. I'm going to hand it back over to Beth, who's going to facilitate a conversation with the State Advisory Council.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, in our last couple of minutes, would love to create some space for SAC members. If you have any reflections based on what you heard in the small groups or in the sharing, whether it's things that stood out or kind of opportunities and places that you feel like you can lean in the next year. Any reflections from our SAC members?
I would say, I feel like I'm always the one who jumps in, but
Please, yeah.
I learned something about the provisional license and it going away and what impact that has on, I think, our childcare centers as well as our providers. And we'll definitely be looking to learn more about that and see if I can be helpful as the next group of legislators heads in to the session next year. Maybe there's a way for us to put some pressure through the legislative branch to get that done. And there were other, I mean, it was just really interesting to see. I'll just say quick, one thing to share is that our committee visited a Milton Child Care Center this year. And it was just recently, actually, a couple of weeks ago, we went to see Spectrum, who we want to have provide more opportunities for our homeless youth. And then on our way back, we stopped at the Milton Child Care Center, and it was incredible. The woman who runs the program there was so excited and just couldn't say enough good things about her ability to hire, that she would put an ad in the paper in the past and she might get one application, but most likely she had to ask her friends if they knew anyone that was available. And then now when she puts an ad in the paper or an ad on Front Porch Forum, she gets between 8 and 10, and she actually has to review it all and really think about who's the best person for the job, and just how different that feels as for everyone in the environment, not just the parents, but also the other folks who work there, and how that makes them feel like they're part of a program and a career that is needed, wanted, and there's interest in it, and that makes a big difference. So I just can't say enough, and I know that we still have a long, October we'll get to the 575% of the federal poverty level for CCFAP, and hopefully more funds for grants so that people in childcare centers that know they have to do something to sort of take the next step in order to have more, the ability to offer more to their employees as well as more to their program, will have those opportunities. So always building bright futures for me, coming here gives me more interest in doing more. So thanks.
Thank you. Any other SIC members want to share? Yeah, go ahead, Flor.
Yeah, I just want to say that one thing that I'm always reminded of, and Kelly and Renee brought this up at our group, is the importance of having all the stakeholders together in this meeting, talking and being aligned, because one of the things that, we all care about is having that consistency. And in our group, we talked a lot about having the consistency across the state. So it doesn't matter where the child is, we're all having the same expectations for that child and wrapping around the services and having some consistency so we have better outcomes for kids. And it starts with us all being aligned at the different sectors. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thanks, Flor. Janet, I see your hand, and then Amber.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I apologize. I wasn't able to be here for the entire meeting. We were having our Department for Children and Families annual recognition ceremony for some members of our team. But just listening to the part of the group that I was in, as well as the report outs, I just wanted to share quickly that in terms of childcare financial assistance, we are already paying out, I think on a monthly basis, we're paying out like 37% more every month than we were paying a year ago. So I think there is, I mean, so more money is flowing out to programs. I know that I feel like what I heard in that group and a little bit what we heard in the group as well is sort of like, it's hard to, we know that it hasn't been long enough for us to be able to like truly track like every measure and have it all, have it flow into success. But I think, you know, just the fact that we are sure that the resources are getting out there to programs. And we were hearing, I also enjoyed hearing from a program leader, a program director who talked about the challenges that there's with so many things changing, you sort of have to go through a full cycle to really have the ability to plan ahead and begin to make longer term commitments to both your staff and to your center and to your, sort of your business plan, which makes perfect sense. And I think might be part of why some of the additional indicators, like they lag a little bit, because you really do need to get through that full business cycle to sort of understand how these changes are going to impact your, what resources you have available to serve children and families. And then two other things I just want to note related to the workforce data. I think we have some good workforce data. We've been offering some incentives that are supporting folks who have already engaged in that in advancing their credentials. Recently with some of the ARPA money that's been, and Vermont UIC as a partner, that's I think going to strengthen our data. And then the big piece is we're still working on a new, the next part of our CDD information system. So just sort of bringing it back to, again, sort of that letting sort of the time it takes for us to see the results. That in this case, seeing some of the results is going to require us to have the right data system to be able to pull the data in the way that we need. But it's in process. And then finally, I feel like this is like one of the third times in the last couple of weeks that I really heard about the wraparound supports for families, and especially sort of potentially related to the children's integrated services and the supports for children that are 0 to 3 versus sort of the structure that's associated with the children that are 3 to 5. And so I just wanted to flag and recognize that I heard that from this group. Like I said, I've heard it in a couple other meetings recently. And so that's definitely on my radar now. And I want to, we'll explore with our team and with the more community members on that specifically.
Thanks, Janet. Amber, go ahead.
I just wanted to share that kind of my overarching reflection is how interconnected all these areas are. So I heard some of the kind of successes in some areas that are challenges in others. One of the big ones that comes to mind is around workforce, that it sounds like there's been a lot of progress around screening tools and kind of building some different programs, but then there aren't always the people to put in those roles. So I think thinking about what my role is going forward in this sort of venue is thinking about how do we make all those things interconnect. We can't keep working in silos on individual pieces, but how do we now connect those so that the successes in some areas that have been challenges, everything becomes more successful. And also, obviously, as my role as a parent rep here is, what does that look like on the ground? Because sometimes I think when you're in the weeds about it, it all sounds really great. You put a program in place or you have more people in workforce, but are they in the right place? Are they getting to the people who need it most? So trying to figure out how to hear what is happening on the ground and bring that into the conversation as much as possible.
So true. Thank you, Amber, for that. Any other reflections from SAC members? Again, so as we think about our work in monitoring the VECAP, which sometimes is hard to kind of get our head wrapped around, this is exactly what this space, what the State Advisory Council, what the regional councils, what the BBF Network is charged to do. And I appreciate your time in coming to this space, bringing your kind of perspective to be able to speak to that part of the early childhood system. I think it's important to recognize successes, even though it is sometimes hard to identify them, but they are there. And as well as identifying kind of what work remains, which we know that this is the long game. These are not issues that are solved quickly, but that is why we're here, true collective impact. So So with that, I want to thank everyone for being here. What a great conversation, and appreciate your time in small groups. We are going to work to compile the data that you shared, qualitative data, into our inventory, and we'll be able to share that with you shortly. We are going to take a quick break to transition into our State Advisory Council business meeting, where we will present the FY25 budget, Building Bright Futures budget. Everyone is welcome to stay on. All SAC meetings are public, but if you need to hop off, you are welcome to do that as well. So we will come back together. Let's say we'll start at 2:30 for the business meeting. Sound good? All right. See you shortly.
All right, welcome back to our State Advisory Council members. We are at our May 2024 business meeting for our State Advisory Council. We are going to be talking about our budget for a little while in this business meeting, but we do have a little bit of SAC business in terms of roll call and approval of March minutes. So I believe that right now we have some members of the public, but if you are an SAC member, I'm inviting you to turn your cameras on if you're able to. Any non-SAC members, please turn your cameras off, just again, so we can make more connections across our State Advisory Council members. And then I'm going to hand it over to Elisa to do roll call.
Thanks, Morgan. Well, my facilitative notes say that it's morning, but I'm going to say good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to do a quick roll call. I'm just going to go through the list and just say here if you are. Janet McLaughlin, DCF. Here. Cheryl Wilcox. Here. Meg Portella, AOE, or Tammy Bates.
Tammy's here.
Excellent. Thanks, Tammy. Renee Kelly. Here. Shayla Livingston, AHS.
She sent her regret.
Thanks, Beth. Jessica Vintner from ACCD.
Jessica's not here.
Thank you. Tiffany North Reed from the Office of Racial Equity.
Me is here, but not responding.
Okay, thanks. And now to our legislators. Representative Jessica Brumstead.
Here.
Thank you. And Senator Ruth Hardy.
Not here.
Thanks, Beth. And now to the private at-large members. The co-chair, Flor Diaz-Smith.
Hi, here.
Thanks, Flor. Eddie Gale.
I'm here, thanks.
Thanks. Caroline Godden.
Here.
Sharon Harrington.
Here.
Becca Webb.
Here.
Dimitri Gardner.
Here. Hi, folks.
I've lost my Danielle Mitchell from Washington County Mental Health.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Deb Harswick.
Hello, here.
Thank you. Christy Swenson.
Here.
Amber Houston.
Here.
Libby Dalian. No Libby. Keona Heath.
Here.
Thanks, Keona. Erica McLaughlin.
Here.
And for non-voting members, Kendall Smith. I think that's a no. Excellent. I think that's everyone, Morgan. I'll pass it back to you. Oh, and Erica Radke sent her regrets. That was on page 2. Sorry, I missed it. Passing it back.
No worries. Thanks all. All right. So quick SAC business. Did everyone have a chance to look at our March SAC minutes? And if so, can someone make a motion to accept them? Dimitri, I'll accept yours as a motion. Can I ask for a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Carol. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Beautiful. All right. March minutes passed. Thanks all. All right. Really excited to talk about our FY25 budget. Anna or Beth, are either of you in a position to screen share? If not, I'm happy to do that. Awesome. So one of the really exciting announcements that I get to make is that we're coming into this fiscal year in the strongest financial position and organizational position that we've ever been in as an organization, and definitely over the past 5 years. So we are presenting a budget to you all of $5.2 million. You're seeing a very brief breakdown. I'll talk to you a little bit more about what goes into each of those categories, but we're looking at about $250,000 in overhead, travel, and other. We're looking at $1.7 million in staffing with 17.5 FTEs, so 1 additional staff member, and then about $3.2 million in grants, contracts, and consultation funding. One of the other really exciting pieces for me in terms of presenting this budget is that we are fully funded for FY25. So for those of you who are new to Building Bright Futures State Advisory Council, there have been plenty of times where I am standing before the board saying, we have approximately 60% of our funding confirmed, and here's what we are setting as a goal to raise in this period of time. And we're asking you to accept the budget with both confirmed sources, but also our planned goals for fundraising and development. At this moment, we have all $5.2 million confirmed for FY25. And that we are in strong fiscal position even as we look forward. So not just from a cash flow perspective, which is meaning in our bank account, we can cover those costs, again, due to some really strong partnerships with our state agency leaders, namely the Child Development Division and the Department of Health, where a lot of our funding is situated. But as we're looking at our long-term budget over time, we are really looking at building that sustainable infrastructure as a team. So really excited to be presenting that level of budgeting today. A couple of things that are outliers that I want to name as I'm moving through. The first is the preschool development grant. And the reason that I want to name this is that for folks who aren't involved in some of the fiscal management, it's an incredibly complicated grant. It's 3 full years of funding. It runs on a calendar year versus a fiscal year, which means that from a budgeting perspective at Building Bright Futures, we are budgeting by month and in 6-month increments and annual, both for the calendar year and the fiscal year. So just to name for you all that as we are building our projections, we have 5-year budgeting forecasting, but then we also have individual forecasting for every single grant, especially those that are longer term. And the only thing that's not in the budget right now that we're asking you to approve today is an increase of $30,000 for Vermont Early Childhood Fund. And we're working with the Child Development Division on the transition of the license plate dollars. So for those of you who don't have a Building Bright Futures license plate, you should go out and get one sometime in the next 3 months, because that funding will transition to us to be able to support funding to communities to increase the Vermont Early Childhood Fund and maintain that over time. The only other things I want to talk about before we transition to the next slide, especially for those of you who are new to the board, we've done a significant amount of prioritization on financial management and infrastructure. So as we have been working on development and grant writing activities, we've been incredibly intentional with our timing, the partnership with state agencies and the legislature, and we've adapted our entire system for managing and monitoring funding. So as an organization, we've gone, at least in the last 5 years, from about a $1 million organization to a $5 million organization. And it's been incredibly strategic and thoughtful and based on the actual funding needed to execute our role and responsibilities in state statute. And what that means is we actually have the funding that we needed to actualize our mission and our values in the right ways and to prioritize our team. In terms of our finance management, especially in the last year, we have been working with a series of consultants to support a range of different activities. So we have finance consultants who are providing kind of CFO level, fractional CFO consultation to our team. We're working with folks around financial and legal compliance related to some of our federal dollars. And we've also been able to have additional support from our previous finance manager as we've transitioned to a new finance manager. And as we have been working with those consultants, we've updated every single system, every finance system that we have as an organization. So now we have more agile operations, we have streamlined reporting, and really strong budgeting processes. So really proud of all of that work. Quick shout out to all of our operations team and Nate, who is our finance manager, for the flexibility and the prioritization of this work. So really incredibly strong, not just in terms of the funding that we've secured, but also our strategies for supporting that amount of money. Next slide, please. So in terms of our funding strategy, I'd like to give folks just a quick background of how we think about our funding. And the first most important thing to know is that we have a 5-year forecast. So instead of just looking at one fiscal year and saying, okay, this is what we have and this is what we're doing, we've moved into having a 5-year forecast model, which allows us to look at all of the different sources of funding over time. And for me, one of the most important things is to have a staggered strategy for writing grants and for securing additional funding. So because we have this 5-year projection, we have the ability to see when funding falls off, when new funding starts, and to really map those pieces to be tracking. And now our fundraising for 1.5 to 2 years in advance, not for the current fiscal year, which is really important. We also have maintained a diverse portfolio of funders across our federal, state, and private sectors. And one thing to know here, and this will not be reflected in our pie charts that Becca mentioned earlier, is that the organization has had a longstanding history of relying on federal grants, where over 75% of the organization's budget is through a federal grant. And so when you do look at the pie charts today, you will see that we have a significant amount of federal funding, but it's not the majority of that funding is going out through subgrants and to priorities within communities, not towards BBF staff and organization operations. So as we built this budget, we thought about a range of different priorities, and I want to walk you through a couple of those. The first was, how do we reconcile our baseline staffing infrastructure and what we need as an organization to execute the roles and responsibilities that are required by state and federal statute and actualizing our mission and values? And we're really in an incredible space where we have done the work to tell people about what the work is and how it functions. And now we are really focusing on how to do that work really well at the highest level with the right level of capacity. So we focused on building and maintaining staffing, prioritizing and retaining talent. So I'll talk in a couple of minutes about the one additional staff position. But one of the really cool things that we did this year was a tiered cost of living, and then an equity team-based merit adjustment. So those are two separate things that I can talk about in a couple of minutes. The other thing we really focused on was having a strong configuration and balance between inside staff and then contractors and consultants, as well as subgrants out to communities. Next slide, please. So this slide is just here so that you all have a sense when we say the Building Bright Futures team versus the Building Bright Futures network, that it is a compilation of 17, and we're adding a policy manager that's outlined in the yellow box in the center of the board. But really, one of the most important things to know is we have such an incredible staff with so many different skills and expertise across the right areas. And I'm really proud of the work that this team has done. We've also really tried to consider the feedback that we've gotten from our executive board and others around, monitoring early childhood legislation, monitoring the impact of policy recommendations, and really thinking critically about how we at Building Bright Futures support the network in monitoring the system. So that is what you're seeing in the addition of a policy manager in this next year. As I mentioned, we, as we look at our staffing infrastructure, when you see the actual numbers, we've done so much work in the human resources space over the last year and a half, specifically in working with a consultant to develop a wage matrix. We documented our compensation philosophy. We have recommitted to equity and equity adjustments, and continuous review of market rates and cost of living. So as you're looking at this year's budget, we're really excited to be able to use that wage matrix now to say, okay, here's where each member of our staff is related to their starting point and their midpoint, related to market rates and our compensation philosophy, where we really want to prioritize our team. I'm not going to read that compensation philosophy, but I'm also happy to send it to board members if you're interested in hearing more about that. But it's really focused on equity, internal equity, talent, expertise, and providing a really incredible compensation package to support and retain the team. It's also based on the recognition that no one achieves success alone. So we really look at, in terms of merit adjustment, looking at an increase for the entire team. So when you look at the numbers, what you will notice is that we have a 5% cost of living for anyone making less than $85,000 and a 2% cost of living for anyone making over $85,000. So in terms of that progressive tiered cost of living, you're seeing us really say, we recognize that cost of living is different based on the income level, and how do we really value all of our team members in that space. You will also notice that we did a team-wide increase, which is a team-based merit adjustment based on our compensation philosophy and that work with our HR consultants of 3%. All right, next slide, please. So getting into the numbers with you all, you should have received this in advance, but please feel free to ask questions when I'm done. Again, what you're seeing in purple on the left-hand side of your screen is that about 76% of our funding is coming from federal sources. Again, my caution to you is that that is not all used internally. The majority of that funding is going out the door, and you'll see that when I get into the expenses. I also want to call your attention to the list of private philanthropic funders that are contributing to about $370,000 of our budget this year. Again, these are some of our longstanding champions and some new champions in this space. We also have some that choose to be anonymous. So that is also why you're not seeing each of the names listed with dollar amounts, because of some of that suppression. In terms of the federal portion of this budget, that is in purple. We have funding from HRSA and through the Early Childhood Comprehensive Systems grants. We have funding through the Preschool Development Grant, and we have funding through OPRE in collaboration with Child Trends. And then as you look at that last section of state funding, that is a combination of our legislative allocation, which is the money that our base funding that is coming through the Child Development Division that is specifically to execute our role in state and federal statute. And then the CCDF or CCDBG, which is child care dollar or child care. Oh, I'm not going to get there, Janet. CCDF. Help me out. Child Care Development Fund. Development Fund, thank you, to really support some of the extensive work that both of our teams are doing in the data space. Next slide, please. So $5.2 million budget. And when you look at where the money is going and how we are spending it, you'll see that we have about $200,000 in overhead, $86,000 in other, which is again, other travel, some contractual expenses. We have about 1.7 in personnel with 17.4, it should be 17.5 staff. And then our salaries at around 1.3 million. Our fringe rate is based on those salaries at about 336,000. And then some of the biggest components of our budget, again, you're seeing that 2.8 specifically for Vermont Early Childhood Funds grants going out the door. And then you see our non-VECF program expenses at 335. That is all of our contractual consultants and some of our other expenses in that bucket. I think those are really important numbers for you to see, but I also, taking the guidance of our executive board, next slide, please, wanted to show you what you all approved last year compared to what we are asking you to approve this year. So when you look at the budget for FY24, we were talking about a 3.9 or $4 million budget, and now we're talking about a $5 million budget. The changes that I want to draw your attention to are minimal. We're going from 300,000 to 218 in overhead. That is not a mistake. We have configured how we think about and talk about overhead. And so a lot of what we had captured as overhead in the previous year has now transitioned into the non-VECF program related expenses, contracts and consultants. So you're seeing that amount go up this year. So that is a more true compilation of overhead for the organization. No significant differences in again, that's some of our travel and other related expenses for the organization. In terms of personnel, you're seeing a slight increase based on that new 1 FTE, but also the adjustments to cost of living and merit-based increases. And then again, the fringe associated with that. Again, seeing a slight increase in contracts. I shouldn't say slight. There's a decent increase in contracts and consultants. Again, some of that is because we've moved some of that funding out of the overhead bucket and into the other area. Some of that is based on what it takes to execute the preschool development grant on behalf of the state. So there's a lot of administrative support through contracts and consultants to be able to do that work well in terms of updating the strategic plan and the equity work. So really excited about those dollars, but that's what you're seeing in terms of the total dollar amounts there. The next slide that I want to show you quickly is around VECF grants. So move your brain from FY25 to FY27 when you're looking at our financial picture. A significant portion of our current budget is, that funding that is going out the door to communities, and that shifts significantly when you look at FY27. So we go to having to maintain a $2.2 million budget, where about $150,000 would be going out the door to communities. Again, based on fundraising and different development goals, that number will absolutely change. And before we transition into questions, slide 9, please, Anna. Especially because you, as our state advisory council, have not necessarily seen and heard as much about some of our VECF grantees, I wanted to make sure that I shared this slide with you and gave you just a minute to look at across the 4 different areas that are prioritized. So equitable access, improving the quality, workforce, and connecting families with services and family leadership opportunities. There's a significant amount of funding going out to incredible partners across every corner of the state. And that this funding is happening in conjunction with so many partners. There's an incredible rigorous process. A quick shout out to Michelle, who is overseeing all of that work and who created this, this visual. So when you are thinking about the amount of funding that we have and that we are a pass-through for, there is a significant amount going out the door to communities. Anna, I'm going to have you put up slide 6 for me, and then I want to pause and have folks ask questions. We have about 5 minutes for discussion. And I specifically want to invite our executive board members who have now heard this presentation in different iterations at least 2 times. If there are things you want to share, please jump in. Dimitri.
Yeah, thanks, Morgan. You always do a really clear presentation on the budget. The only blind spot, it feels like to me, is that I don't know that we've seen actuals against the FY24 budget, sort of income statement and balance sheet. Is that something that the executive committee reviews? And is that something that would typically go to this? I know we didn't look at those last year either, so I just don't know how we did against the budget. Are we on par, and how does that affect what are our liquid assets?
Great question. So we have quarterly financial meetings with the executive board. Thank you, executive board, for dealing with all of our finances with us. So they are reviewing that information definitely on an annual basis, and they will review that coming soon. I would say one of the biggest caveats that I shared up in the beginning was the preschool development grant. So we are able to carry a significant amount of revenue into this fiscal year for the preschool development grant, which is why you're seeing additional funding, specifically in grants going out the door there, because the funding that we received in last fiscal year wasn't able to be executed in the same time frame that we had originally projected. Sorry, Cheryl. So in year one of the preschool development grant, we had projected a significant amount of grants going out the door that we are now dispersing over the course of multiple years. That is the major outlier in terms of that funding. The other piece that I would name is that we did receive, for those of you, again, who are not in the weeds on finance with us, from a cash flow perspective, because the majority of our funding comes from state and federal dollars in this moment, it means that almost all of those are reimbursement based, which means we need to spend money in order to be reimbursed for those dollars, which puts us often in a really challenging position for cash flow. But this past year, as one of our partners was spending down funding in their most recent round of grants, the Donnelly Foundation, we were the recipient of significant dollars that have now allowed us to have additional unrestricted dollars that we have to contribute to cash flow. So that is something that you don't see reflected in this budget in terms of where we are and our assets coming into the next year. Happy to talk more with folks about that at another time if you're interested. Janet.
I just wanted to add, Demetria asked sort of similar questions. I'm new on the executive committee, but I think that the answer, the things that I observed is I do think, right, that the BBF team is, I mean, they do share the financial statements and so the budget actuals with the exec committee. We are seeing those. The team has made really significant changes, including recategorizing their all their accounts within QuickBooks and their program codes and all, like, doing the accounting things that do make the year-over-year comparison for the budget, right, tricky. Plus BBF being in growth mode right now has also made the year-over-year less helpful. But I felt like in the conversation with Morgan and with Nate, they were really basing their projections off of either actuals from this year, right, or specific, commitments that they've made within grants. So as a board member who was reviewing it, I felt comfortable with those projections, even though I did sort of say, when I'm on other boards, the information gets presented a little bit differently. But those were the two main reasons, was just sort of the major sort of changes in some of the changes in the accounting structure, and then also just the changes in the scope and size of the organization right now.
Thanks, Janet. Other questions, Dimitri?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I think I'd love to see a copy of the balance sheet if that's possible. It just helps give context. I noticed in the earlier slide it talked about being in a strong cash position. I just don't have context of what that means, so a balance sheet would be really helpful.
Yes, absolutely. So Nate and I can follow up with you, Dimitri. And I think, one of the examples that I can give is that in the past, we may be waiting on reimbursed funding from 3 different awards, especially in August when the state has shut down. And we might be making several phone calls because we're concerned about not being able to make payroll. We are no longer in that position, but the executive board has also been really strategic with us in thinking about the importance of having a line of credit, specifically for instances where, again, that money is a definite and we already have the agreements in place and it's strictly based on the funding coming to us from state agencies or from the federal government. So really important guidance that we've received from the executive board in that area as well. Other questions? We got 2 minutes to call that vote.
Morgan, I can ask if somebody has a motion to approve the budget, but even before we do that, I just wanted to say that I wanted to thank Nate and Morgan and Beth and the entire team at Building Bright Futures for presenting this budget to us. And Dimitri, I just want to say that one of the things that I appreciated the most this year and last year is our ability to bring equity into our organization, but also actualize our mission by the way that we're handling our finances. So a very comprehensive way of really building systems for the future. So with that, would somebody please make a motion to accept the 2025 Building Bright Futures organizational budget.
I'm happy to make a motion. Oh,
Oh, Cheryl, you want to rock,
Thank
paper,
you,
scissors?
Cheryl. Yeah, so Cheryl moves it and Renee seconds it. Is that, am I reading the room right, Renee? All
Sure.
right, so we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all of those in favor, please signify by saying aye. I would love to hear your voices.
Aye.
Please raise your hand.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, we have a budget and the motion carries. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Huge celebrations. I could not have done this without my team and the executive board and this full board. We really appreciate the support, and what an incredible VCAP summit today, monitoring progress towards the strategic plan. If you have anything else to share with us, please reach out. And if not, I'm headed to gymnastics to go cheer Amelie on. Have a great rest of your Monday.
Hey, thanks.
Bye all.